Hello, I thought it's about time I did one of my Shoeoff tests again. So I've got a range of shoes that I've laid out here on the garden chairs with Daisy in attendance. So I've got some new shoes that I've got recently, the 1080 V10s there on the end, the NOVABLAST, the TCs, and then some shoes I've had for a little bit longer, the Turbo 2, the SL20 and the NEXT%. So these three shoes here all weigh about the same. This has got the carbon plate in it, and these are just sort of fairly max cushioned sort of everyday type trainers. The Turbo 2 is a sort of a lighter everyday shoe, as is the SL20 and of course the NEXT%. So what I'm going to do today, I think, is to run about a 2 mile tempo effort, about my marathon pace, so about 6:50 3-hour pace in these three shoes. See how they get on. Now, these are the three shoes that Andy, Forest of Dean runner, has been trying out. I think he ran a 5K time trial in both the NOVABLAST and the Fuelcell TC. And I think he also quite likes the 1080 VT. And all these shoes, as I say, they're all fairly similar size. So I'll focus on these ones today and see how they get on, and see if we can see any difference between any of these shoes in terms of how they feel on feet, what heart rate I get, what power I get, just sort of a general feeling as which one I prefer. Okay, let's get the first pair on. Try the 1080 V10s first. I'll do a little warm-up just to get into the swing of it, and then I'll do 2 miles at about 6:50 pace, and then the next, then in the NOVABLAST, and I'll finish in the TCs, which in theory the TC should be easiest because they're the most expensive shoe. They've also got the carbon plate in it, but does that actually make any difference? We shall see. Okay, see you later. Bye. Run done in the 1080 V10s. Yeah, they fit okay. They're nice. They're the narrow fitting shoes, so they fit me quite well. I now moved on to the ASICS NOVABLAST. So I did about one watch said 6:42 pace, the other one said 6:47. So we'll say call it quits in 6:45, which is exactly what I did in my 2:56 marathon in Seville. Although, having said that, I wouldn't be able to do 26 miles tonight in those shoes. That was felt like considerably harder. A bit of wind in the air tonight, and it's not, as I said, not a perfectly flat course here. In fact, the end bit was slightly uphill and slightly into the wind. So, but it felt like I was in a good, strong pace. I could actually maintain that pace, so that was good. So now we've got on the NOVABLASTs here. You can see. So in theory, the NOVABLASTs will be softer. And I think the one that Andy Forest of Dean runner really raised about. Now, for me, they're a bit wide, so I'll be slightly sceptical whether they work just as well for me as they do for him. But let's see in this test. I think it's been the first time I've actually run this sort of effort in these shoes, apart from some hill sprints. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on. And Daisy, no doubt, will be waiting for me later. Right, see you later, Daisy. Bye. Okay, run done in the NOVABLAST. That was definitely felt a lot harder. I think just mainly the fit of the shoe. The fit is quite a wide fitting shoe for me, and I've got a very narrow foot. So with the fact that the 1080 V10s are actually in the narrow version, so it's much more suited to me. I felt much more locked in, felt the rocker much more. With those NOVABLASTs, I felt like I was swimming a bit. Maybe even I've actually got the wrong size. I've got 13.5 in both of those two. And traditionally, I've always been a 12.5, but I thought I was, wanted a bit more upfront room. But anyway, I managed to run exactly the same pace, more or less. I think it was a few seconds faster. No, maybe, of course, I've just run the second run, and I'm just tired from the first one. That's quite a hard effort, but it was averaged about 6:45 pace. So again, bang on my marathon pace. But again, 2 miles was enough in those. I don't think I would have wanted to go much further. So I'm now in the third and last one tonight, which is the Fuelcell TCs. Now, when I weighed these ones, they came in around about just under 330 grams compared to the other two shoes that I'd 1080 V10 and the NOVABLAST at 340. And this is also in a 13.5. So you've got the same size in all of these. The TCs only do a medium. I think they do a wide as well. So these do feel a bit wider than the 1080 V10s I've got, but I can do the laces up reasonably well. I think, again, this will be the first time I've tried sort of marathon pace in these. I've done a couple of long runs. I'm going to say sort of long, really decent runs, 13, 14 miles. And they've shaped up well in those. But I'm going to pick up the pace a bit now from, I think I was doing about 7:30s in them to 6:45s for this last one. And see how we go. Okay, see you later. Bye. So, Daisy's waiting patiently for the results of my latest test. So, the Fuelcell TC there, again, I felt the fit was a bit stroppy. I think I ran that fractionally faster than the other two by about 15-20 seconds, but it felt tough. But I think what gives the opportunity now is to try the NEXT% to set these shoes in context to see. I'm actually quite tired now. That's 6 miles, well, more like 6.5 miles, actually getting on for 7 at a marathon pace on a hilly circuit or a rolling circuit that day after a flat out mile. So Let's see if the next percent actually give any help and set these runs into context. But so far, those shoes, obviously slightly skewed by the fact that I wore them first, but the 1080 V10s felt the most comfortable on feet by a long way. It just felt, it fitted me so much better. But you expect that because I got an narrow fitting. And the NOVABLAST are wide, and the TCs are medium, so effectively they're a bit wide for me anyway. Right, so let's get the next percent on and get going for this last run. Right, we're back from the run in the next percent. So that was quite hard work, that last one, but it definitely felt easier in the next percent. I'll have to check the heart rates in a minute. Give you a bit of some stats, but we'll go inside and check all that stuff out as well. So hello, I'm back indoors now, and I've had a chance to analyse all these 4 runs. So just to remind you what I did, I ran around sort of a circuit from my house, which I measured it to be 2.11 miles, and I was trying to run at my approximate marathon pace in these 4 shoes. So starting off with the New Balance 1080 V10, moving on to the ASICS NOVABLAST, the New Balance Fuelcell TC, the new sort of carbon-plated sort of training competition shoe. That's what TC stands for, and the good old trusty Nike Next Percent. So what I did is I had a little warm-up for about a mile, just steady, so I wasn't coming into the first run cold. You probably actually, in hindsight, we can actually probably compare the 2 sort of cushion trainers, the 1080 V10, the NOVABLAST, and then the more up-tempo carbon-plated shoes, because as it turned out, I actually ran the 2 cushion shoes slightly slower. I think maybe I just got my... I was trying to run these the same pace, but maybe we got a bit carried away and I put the TC on. I just felt a bit looser. So let's go through the time. So I started off running 14:15 for the whole circuit, and I've also broken it down into effectively the middle first mile and the middle second mile. What I mean by the middle is that I think I left my road after about 100 meters, and then I come back to it for the final 100 meters. So this mile here was basically when I'd gone between about 0.05 and to 1.05 miles, and then the second mile after it. So I was kind of like in my stride by then, and we can compare things. And I think the first mile here was fractionally more downhill than the second one, which kind of reflects in the times that I tend to be slower in the second mile. So the interesting thing here is that we started off with a 14:15 in the 1080 V10. My average heart rate was 128. You kind of expect the average heart rate to be a bit lower on the first one because obviously you're fresher. But you can probably pick up some sort of indication from the max heart rate and indeed what happened in the second mile. So it looks like in the 1080 V10, it was the one that actually ran the 2 miles the most even split. So I got a 6:46 and a 6:49. So I was probably running that quite controlled. Now, I do like the 1080 V10 because it's basically a narrow fitting shoe that I managed to get. It's one of the New Balance versions that have the different widths. They don't do them in all the shoes, but in this one I think they have not only a narrow, but I think they have a wide and an extra wide as well as a standard. So they have 4 different widths. And I certainly noticed between the 1080 V10 and the NOVABLAST, which are in some ways quite similar shoes in terms of what they are. They weigh the same, they're kind of similar purpose, like an everyday cushion trainer. I certainly feel a lot more comfortable in the 1080 V10 from a fit point of view, which certainly sort of helps on the road, I think. Just got a feeling that it's just a bit more suited for me. I know a lot of people love the NOVABLAST, but and I did a run in them on the other day. It's quite well nicely cushioned, but I felt like it was just too much shoe for me, really. I was almost having to, well, I do have to sort of pull the tongues in so tight that, it's kind of losing the dimensions of what it was really designed for. So I like the NOVABLAST, but I think for me it's not ideal. So when I moved to the NOVABLAST, I ran that one slightly quicker, and you can see the average heart rate has gone up and the maximum stayed the same. I ran the first mile a bit quicker than in the 1080 V10 and actually slowed down a bit. So I think it's difficult to read too much into the comparison between those two because obviously I was fresh on the first one, and then the NOVABLAST trying to do similar things. So I think I would say that in terms of like just like what actually felt better for me, and I think just felt a bit more confident in the 1080 V10, but it's not really a shoe for going fast in, I don't think. And You can see here that the powers 288 and 293, and it just reflects the fact I was just marginally quicker in the Nova Blast. Hard to read too much into that. Maybe a slightly higher cadence in the Nova Blast. I'm not quite sure why that was. But then I think it's more interesting if you compare the TC and the next percent. So I strapped on the TCs, and again, they don't really fit me that well because they only do a medium or a wide in the TC, not a narrow. So I do find that the fit in the TC not as good as, say, the next percent, which really hugs my feet, and the 1080 V10 being a narrow. But having said that, these results aren't too bad. I mean, I sort of inadvertently picked up the pace here a bit, and I ran the first mile in 6:26, and then the next one in 6:42. Although interestingly, you see that my heart rate is going up here, 133 average and 141 maximum. And these actually were interesting, were the highest heart rates of all the 4 tests. Now, I was originally going to stop after the TC, and I thought, well, it's a good opportunity to actually put the next percents and have a direct comparison between the 2 shoes, because I've seen a few comparisons on YouTube between them, but no really sort of statistical data to actually put into play. So this one actually was quite careful the next percent and tried to run this as close as possible to the TC time. And as you look, I got that spot on, really. I got that within 1 second overall. And I ran the first mile 2 seconds faster, and was 4 seconds slow on the second one. The reason why they don't add up because this is that sort of 100-meter run in and run out at either end, but near enough exactly the same effort. So I was already quite tired by then, because don't forget this was best part of a 10-mile, well, certainly at least 9-mile marathon pace effort, with a bit of the only rest to sort of change shoes and talk to the camera. So although the times were similar, what was interesting here is that the heart rate has actually come down. So the heart rate is actually pretty much in the next percent identical to the Nova Blast, which was in my second run, and I would obviously run this one as the last one. So I think that alone is a sort of a subtle indication that the next percent is slightly better for me than all these other shoes, because clearly I got that heart rate as low as these two, or in fact lower, and I ran as fast. So, and it just sort of feels to me, because it really does, as I said earlier, hug that midfoot, which I like, and I like that sort of lockdown feeling in the midfoot, and then maybe allowing a bit more room in the toe box to allow my toes to spray out a bit, and making sure I've got enough room between the end of the big toe and the end of the shoe, because then shoes like the Adidas range, I can only get 12.5 in them, like the Boston and the Adios and the SL20. And I don't feel I've got quite enough room in them. So I'm all struggling a bit. So to have that extra room in the next percent, and indeed all these other shoes have plenty of room in them, is great. But so yeah, I think you could definitely say that this is quite a marginal difference. And I think similar to my previous Shoeoff videos, that all these shoes, you know, from these sort of next percent being probably the most talked about shoe of perhaps all time, really, today, and then all these other shoes, which are, I think they've all had very good reviews, and they all serve a purpose, and I've continued to run them. I've got to Nova Blast, I've got about 100 miles in them so far. TC, I've done 2 long runs in, and I'll continue to use them for some training. But I think for me, whenever I want to actually get that fastest day possible, I want to go out for my workouts and want to go out for my races, if we have any races, then I'm always looking for the next percent, and I'm always looking in these videos to see evidence to back up my feeling that they do feel, for me, better. And I think certainly when you compare this heart rate of 2 beats lower, despite the fact I was tired, it's quite an indication that there must be something in this. So looking at these other stats, the cadence, maybe the cadence sort of is pretty similar, maybe just a bit of an outlier on that first one. I've got 2 sets of numbers here. One is measured by the Stryd foot pod, and the other is measured by the Garmin heart strap. So the ground contact times are actually pretty similar in all the shoes. I think obviously you reflect when you go a bit faster, your ground contact time actually speeds up, and it interesting here that with almost identical times, they've got almost identical ground contact time, which is reassuring. Vertical oscillation, the Stryd and the Garmin do tend to measure this quite differently, largely because the Stryd is obviously on your foot and the heart rate strap is on your chest. So I think there's a bit of a debate as to what exactly are you measuring there. And again, they're pretty similar. The ones from the Stryd, all hard to say much in this. Can't really read too much into this. And there are the Strava links if you want to have a further look at those. So yeah, I think this test for out-and-out performance between the TC and the Next Percent is not entirely surprising. The Next Percent wins, I think, for me. But clearly the TC being £60 less in UK money is definitely worth considering for, as it says, training and competition. And I think I'll be continuing to do that, as I will be continuing to use the 1080 V10 and NovaBlast for perhaps more of my easy days. But as you can see from this test, they also perform reasonably well when you want to pick up the pace. Not quite as good as the out-and-out racing shoes, but not entirely expected. But equally, they're not sort of dead weights on your foot, and you can certainly pick up the pace. So, hope you found that interesting, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Okay, bye.